There's a lot of weirdness in Bikini Bottom, but there's even more in the sides you've never seen before. From a visit to the single creepiest place in town to Squidward's attempts to not end his life, this is the dark side of Bikini Bottom. And we're gonna kick off our list with the weirdest of the weird parts of Bikini Bottom, Rock Bottom. It's truly the place you don't want to be. So we open on SpongeBob and Patrick wrapping up a day at Glove World, this weirdly unsettling glove-themed park. They're trying to head home when they accidentally hop on the wrong bus, one that takes them straight off a cliff to the absolute depths of underwater nightmare fuel, Rock Bottom. Prepare to see the creepiest part of the ocean you will ever witness. This place is dark, creepy, and crawling with some of the strangest, shadiest-looking deep-sea creatures you'd ever hope not to see. It's also weird and unsettling that SpongeBob's already on edge. Naturally, Patrick manages to leave him behind after catching another bus back up to Bikini Bottom, so now SpongeBob's totally stranded in this freaky undersea underworld. And all because Patrick is too stupid or inconsiderate to take his best friend with him. SpongeBob tries desperately to catch a bus, but every single one either leaves him in the dust or straight up ignores him. But every attempt just ends up being weirder. It's like Rock Bottom's got its own bizarre alien rules. He finally reaches the bus station and waits in line forever, only for the last bus to leave the second he reaches the front of the line. Okay, that's just straight up bad luck.
I demand you come back and get me a bus to Bikini Bottom right now. Until then, I am not leaving this spot.
The Ticketmaster, unbothered, tells him that that's the last ride until morning and shuts off the lights. SpongeBob has his trusty glove flashlight, but the battery shorts out, leaving SpongeBob standing there in advanced darkness, which I guess is like regular darkness, but creepier. So now SpongeBob is totally alone, trying to psych himself up, but then he starts hearing this horrific wet raspberry sound echoing around him. Freaked out, he makes a mad dash back to the cliff, trying to get away from whatever the heck is making that noise, all while yelling empty threats that are not at all intimidating coming from a bright orange sponge. Just as it's closing in, this blinding light appears, and there's this anglerfish-looking creature holding its lost glove balloon like he's been watching this whole train wreck unfold. But it turns out the thing is actually kind of friendly? Not at all as freaky as he could be.
Well, that solves my balloon problem, but I've got a bigger problem.
SpongeBob sarcastically thanks the creature for solving his balloon problem, only for the anglerfish to blow up the balloon and tie it to SpongeBob's wrist. He's holding his eyes, muttering that the balloon has enough air, only to realize it's floating him up, out of the hellhole that is Rock Bottom. You know, all things considered, SpongeBob could learn to be a little more friendly in this place. Only takes one sarcastic comment to become fish food, Spongy. The anglerfish gives him a cheerful wave as SpongeBob drifts off to Bikini Bottom, finally landing in front of his house. And, of course, Patrick takes another bus straight back to Rock Bottom, totally oblivious, probably thinking SpongeBob's still stranded in that freak show. I don't have much high hopes for Patrick being able to find his way out of this one, though. But hey, at least we can finally leave Rock Bottom and go back to the slightly more bearable world of Bikini Bottom. Unfortunately, we have to spend time with Squidward, who's desperately trying to find something to live for. It's, are you happy now? So the episode kicks off with Patrick literally climbing out of a dumpster, chomping down on some nasty leftover Krabby Patty like it's fine dining. Well, actually, he might not know what fine dining is, since Patrick will eat anything. Anyway, there's SpongeBob reading the Krusty Krab work schedule. The book has a list of his happiest memories. You know, just in case he forgets to remember. I mean, it's unhinged. And Squidward, of course, sees that. He can't stand this weirdness, so he accidentally scorches SpongeBob's book on the grill. But SpongeBob's ready. He just whips out another copy. No joke, it's almost cult-like. He has so many copies in a cabinet. But when SpongeBob asks Squidward,
What's your happiest memory, Squidward?
to discover Squidward doesn't have one.
I guess I don't have a happiest memory. Oh, well.
What? Well, now SpongeBob's determined to give Squidward a happiest memory, which is a disaster from the start. How could it be anything else? First, they go to a concert where a violinist shoots Squidward in the eye with a bow. It's allegedly an accident, but debatable. Then it's the museum where Squidward's prized art piece gets torched by a critic wielding a flamethrower like a psycho. Less accidental for sure. Finally, SpongeBob shoves Squidward onto a hot air balloon even though the poor guy's terrified of heights. Well, now SpongeBob is worried about Squidward, so he pops the balloon to help them down like a straight-up psychopath. They crash land on a mountain where some dude named Harold was hoping to be the first to the summit.
Son of a seahorse! 20 years of training and a couple of amateurs just leap out of a balloon! Here, you plant it!
An avalanche sweeps them all up, sending them hurtling back to their homes. With the whole thing having failed, Squidward sadly accepts that he will never have a happiest memory. I mean, he barely has a reason to live, so... 2 weeks later, Squidward's totally shut down, holed up in his house like a recluse. SpongeBob, as usual, won't leave him alone. He's obviously terrified that Squidward will unalive. So he's trying everything, from invading his window with Gary, who loses his shell, to literally calling through the phone so loudly that the damn thing breaks. When Squidward tries to shred SpongeBob as he comes through the fax machine, yeah, it's insane, like straight horror movie vibes. Told you it would be weird. SpongeBob eventually traps Squidward in a box and drags him to the Krusty Krab, where he's made 100 papier-mâché SpongeBobs since no one else would show up to the party. It's a terrifying scene of endless smiling SpongeBobs all waiting for Squidward's happiest memory. Honestly, one of the creepiest moments of the entire show. Well, Squidward's had it. He snaps, going on a rampage and smashing every single papier-mâché SpongeBob to bits. Turns out, that is his happiest memory. Just pure chaos, carnage, and relief as he violently smashes SpongeBob to bits. And what's more disturbing? SpongeBob's thrilled for him.
He's so handsome.
So I guess we know how that friendship's going to end. But hey, that's a tragedy for another time. For now, we're looking at Weird and Dark. And what better episode to move on to than Squidward in Clarinet Land, one of the show's weirdest episodes that sends Squidward into a weird LSD world for his clarinet. This episode actually opens on an unsettling note because Squidward is happy. Yeah, he's actually got a little joy in his miserable life today because he's prepping for his clarinet recital that he's super hyped about. He drags himself into the Krusty Krab, failing to dodge punches from bad breath or doors being slammed in his face. But he's grinning like an idiot because his precious clarinet is all safe in a case. Nothing could go wrong. But then this damn baby drools all over his clarinet. Well, that is unacceptable. Squidward loses his mind and demands Krabs give him some high-security, crime-proof locker to keep his baby safe. But Krabs doesn't want to invest in anything new, so instead, he just dumps his old Navy locker on Squidward, and of course, SpongeBob is all over it, turning it into some sparkling clean shrine of Squidward's junk. As in, the clarinet, not that SpongeBob is worshipping Squidward's junk. Let's move on. So Squidward tries to ignore SpongeBob obsessing over his locker, but it's hard when that sponge is practically living inside the thing, doing Lord knows what. So Squidward finally pokes his head inside and finds it's been turned into a whole freaking room. Yeah, SpongeBob is an interior designer now. But then, horror strikes. His clarinet's missing. Squidward's furious, but SpongeBob babbles about moving it to some safe spot. And I mean, would you trust SpongeBob to protect something so valuable? Squidward cannot bear it. He finds this tiny door and stumbles through it, dumping him straight into some dark, eerie forest. But it's not any forest. It's a forest of clarinets. I don't know if that's his best dream or his worst nightmare. But then, the Keeper shows up. A freaky talking eagle head that's all about respecting clarinets and not owning them.
A clarinet is not owned.
Clarinet rights are very important, of course. The thing practically swallows him whole when he tries to explain he just wants his instrument back. Nobody believes Squidward. So he's spat out into some cosmic pinball machine where a massive trippy Patrick treats him like a toy. Okay, I spoke too soon. That's his worst nightmare. Next thing he knows, he's getting sucked up by this enormous vacuum that straight up explodes, and he's chasing SpongeBob around like a lunatic through outer space. It's all one big acid trip. After finally grabbing SpongeBob, they land back in the Krusty Krab, and Squidward wakes up in the locker, soaked in sweat and stressed the hell out. But the nightmare's not over. SpongeBob casually hands him the clarinet he's been chasing all along, confessing he had it the entire time. The safe place he talked about was on SpongeBob the entire time. Squidward, absolutely seething, traps SpongeBob in the locker as revenge, thinking he's finally rid of the guy. But as he's about to start his recital, he opens his case to find SpongeBob smiling back at him like some twisted nightmare that'll never end. Squidward bolts, his clarinet dreams totally trashed, all thanks to the sponge. Unfortunately, Squidward isn't there to discover that SpongeBob was actually just about to present him with his clarinet. Guess that's what happens when you try to help someone in Bikini Bottom. Luckily for some, not everyone is willing or interested in helping other people anyway. I'm speaking mostly about Squidward, whose cruel actions in I Was a Teenage Gary sends the whole plot spiraling into serious body horror. Alright, so SpongeBob's just vibing with Gary when Patrick, oblivious as ever, tells him about some jellyfishing convention out in Ukulele Bottom. SpongeBob is desperate to go, but he knows that his snail cannot survive on his own. Hell, even SpongeBob can barely survive on his own. So he gets it in his head to ask Squidward to watch Gary. Squidward. Of all people in town, Squidward. Well, he just happens to say yes to get SpongeBob and Patrick out of his face so he can soak up some sun and peace. But Squidward is such a jerk that he has no intention of taking care of Gary. While he's lounging, Gary's just left alone in the dark, probably wondering where the hell SpongeBob went. It's straight up depressing, and a pretty strong message about animal welfare to boot. When SpongeBob gets back, Squidward suddenly remembers, oh crap, I was supposed to, keep the pet alive. He rushes to check on Gary and finds him half dead from sheer neglect. Gary's weak, limp, practically a shell of his usual self. Get it, shell? Okay, it's a bad time for jokes. I'll try again later. Anyway, Squidward panics, stuffing food at him, but Gary's too far gone to care.
Eat, you gotta finish this food!
Right then, SpongeBob walks in, forcing Squidward to stuff Gary's food in his own mouth to hide it from his owner. He claims he was just checking up on Gary. When Gary limps out like the poor starving victim he is, SpongeBob flips out, but not at Squidward, he just knows something is wrong. He calls Dr. Gilliam, who's supposed to be a vet.
This is definitely a snail.
But ends up handing SpongeBob this huge syringe and bailing. SpongeBob, too scared to do it himself, shoves the task onto Squidward, who, let's be honest, is responsible for this entire mess happening in the first place. Squidward is also shaking, but goes for it anyway, until SpongeBob freaks and moves Gary, making Squidward jab SpongeBob with the syringe instead. The weirdest part, after all that chaos, Gary just has a drink of water and feels instantly better. Great timing, Gary. All this to torture your owner. But now things really start to get trippy and, frankly, unsettling. SpongeBob starts acting strange, snacking on Gary's food and slowly morphing into a snail himself. It's like some twisted snail body horror as his eyes stretch out and his limbs shrink until, bam, he's full snail. Snail Bob! And I think it's easy to see that even he knows something is very, very wrong. Desperate, Snail Bob slimes over to Squidward's house for help. But how else is Squidward going to react to the sight of his neighbor becoming a snail?
Meow!
Squidward's terrified and freaks out, bolting up the windows and doors, trying to escape this bizarre snail monster he pretty much created. In the chaos, he accidentally jabs himself with the syringe, and of course, he morphs into a snail too. I mean, this really couldn't have ended any other way. The final scene shows Snails, SpongeBob, Gary, and Snail Squidward all perched on a fence, meowing their snail song. Patrick, furious and half asleep, throws a boot at them. He actually manages to knock Squidward off, but do they stop? Nope, they just keep going. Snail style, baby. They don't stop for no fish. They don't stop for anything, actually. But at least they're there, unlike pretty much every single resident of Bikini Bottom in our next episode, gone. So SpongeBob wakes up one day, rolls out of bed to discover that Gary's gone. That's not good. He heads outside and discovers that, well, literally everyone in Bikini Bottom has disappeared. Suddenly, the guy's left alone and he's losing his mind. He's tearing down the streets, busting into houses, calling out for anyone, but nope, it's a ghost town. Bikini Bottom is now nothing more than an abandoned husk of a town. When he finally accepts that no one's around, SpongeBob just has a full psychological break. More than usual anyway. He goes on this weird spree of acting out everyone's lives himself. He makes a SpongeBob bubble and pretends to be Squidward, yelling at himself from Squidward's balcony. He's in the Krusty Krab role-playing Mr. Krabs and Squidward, acting out some bizarre little one-man show. He crashes Patrick's place, swings by Sandy's dome and the boating school, imitating Mrs. Puff. But it's just sad, really. He starts crying in Mrs. Puff's class, realizing this whole act isn't gonna fix anything. He's alone, and he's probably gonna die alone. That's the kind of fun we want from a SpongeBob cartoon, right? SpongeBob finds blank driver's license in the boating school, and it's like he finally cracks. He gives himself a license and hops in the test boat, christening it Bodie, like his new best friend. He's sleeping with the boat, parking it in his living room, probably having dinner with it. He's officially gone mentally. Again, more than usual. Even by his standards, this is weird. He's even set up a puppet of Patrick made of Krabby Patty meat, and they're having a conversation like it's Wilson from that movie Castaway. It's creepy as hell, but I guess at least he's not attacking things. Oh, never mind. SpongeBob starts losing it at the sight of any vehicle, so when a bus actually pulls up, he loses his mind, grabs a fire axe, and just hacks away at it, and boom! Everyone pops out totally alive, just annoyed and weirded out by him. Turns out they all took a day off for National No SpongeBob Day to get a break from him.
Wow! A whole day dedicated to me.
Which is a really messed up thing to do, especially because many of these people claim to be his friends. I mean, jeez. They even have this massive SpongeBob effigy they set on fire and dance on the ashes like they're at some crazy hate fest. It's so cruel. SpongeBob's bummed out, feeling all abandoned, but Mr. Krabs tries to spin it like a tribute. A tribute where they literally abandon him and burn his image. Gotcha.
Where do you see No Patrick Day? Come on, everyone, let's go!
Then Patrick makes the mistake of mentioning No Patrick Day, and suddenly the whole town's on board, ditching him on the next bus out. Even SpongeBob abandons him, as though he hasn't learned how it feels. Poor Patrick's left in the dust, wondering what the heck happened. They're all gone, buddy. Just you now. Which is incidentally also kind of the plot of the next episode, Planet of the Jellyfish, in which SpongeBob notices that Bikini Bottom is attacked by strange jellyfish stealing the identities of the residents. The episode kicks off with SpongeBob and Patrick jellyfishing, just vibing, when suddenly this freaky alien jellyfish monster shows up with black soul-sucking eyes. It's called a Jellian. It's not just catching jellyfish, it's eating them and then spitting out these creepy, gooey Jellian clones. The Jellians are pink, slimy nightmares with the same dead-eyed stare, and they start eyeing up everyone in Bikini Bottom like they're snack food. Delicious, salty, deep-sea snacks. Low intelligence, too, so the nutritional value is low, but the taste is good. Patrick doesn't even notice he's being stalked by one of these things. Next thing you know, the Jellian engulfs him like some freaky cocoon, spits out a goo clone Jellian Patrick, and this Jellian Patrick is dead set on turning the whole town into Jellian versions. SpongeBob's oblivious as always, of course, so Jellian Patrick is leading him around as if nothing's up, even swinging by Squidward's place to infect him too. Now there's a Squidward clone just as creepy and blank-eyed as the rest. They're slowly taking over all of Bikini Bottom, turning the residents into slightly more intelligent versions of themselves. While SpongeBob is in his blissful ignorance, the Jellian army grows. He heads to bed with a Jellian lurking nearby, but he's got this weird late-night paranoia. He accidentally chokes one with popcorn, unknowingly saving his life. Incompetence is truly his best friend. By morning, Bikini Bottom is swarming with these zombie-eyed Jellian clones, and the only one who hasn't been replaced yet is SpongeBob, and he's barely hanging on to his sanity. His intelligence, not so much. When SpongeBob tries to get mayo for one of the customers, he sees every last fish in town hanging in these slimy green cocoons. It's a total horror movie moment. SpongeBob panics, and just as he's about to be cornered, Sandy shows up, the only one unaffected by the whole epidemic. Turns out Jellians hate mayo, which for some insane reason actually repels them, so all mayo haters out there are now immediately suspicious. Armed with a mayo sprayer, SpongeBob and Sandy go full-on Ghostbusters, spraying down the Jellians and freeing the real townsfolk. But it's not over yet. The Jellian King still looms.
Hey guys, what's shaking?
They hit him with the mayo, and when that doesn't work, crank up the thermostat till the hot mayo goo melts him to pieces. So, if in doubt, melt it out. Good advice for life in Bikini Bottom there. But here's the kicker. They start serving the leftover mayo goo as the new Krabby Patty topping. When Patrick orders it with no mayo at the end, everyone's left eyeing him suspicious as hell. Is he really back to normal? Actually, a better question, has Patrick ever been normal? The answer, of course, is a very easy no. But hey, nobody has to be normal during an unexpectedly weird change, like in Krabby Patty Creature Feature, which sees the residents turning into burgers? So Mr. Krabs, greedy as ever, gets tired of everyone whining about the same old Krabby Patty and decides it's time for a revamp, which isn't really like him. The risk of losing money is usually too much to bear, so we know something is very, very wrong. He drags SpongeBob down to his underground lab where Sandy's working on a sketchy new version of the Krabby Patty, which she's calling the Secret Patty.
No! You can't improve the Krabby Patty. It's perfect perfection that cannot be perfected upon.
Yeah, right. Sans a time. Make me 200 of these pronto.
SpongeBob is all sorts of freaked out about it, but Krabs doesn't care. They start serving the damn things up anyway. Who cares about something like side effects or dangers when there's money to be made? But later that night, the chaos begins. After everyone's eaten this new patty, Mr. Krabs starts feeling off. Right in front of SpongeBob, he mutates into this horrific Krabby Patty creature. We're talking burger buns, pickles, the whole monstrous package. In my opinion, he looks better than he usually does, but hey, that's just my personal taste. Sandy soon morphs too, and then all the customers, until half of Bikini Bottom has turned into burger beasts, lumbering around town and literally feeding parts of themselves to others to spread the horror. SpongeBob's screaming at this point, bolting into the nearest dumpster to hide from this patty apocalypse. Seriously, man, you spent your whole life obsessing about these burgers, and now that your friends have become them, you just run? Coward! Now, Perch Perkins shows up as one of the last holdouts, warning SpongeBob that Plankton might be the only other one not infected. So SpongeBob races to the chum bucket and tries to lock everything down, but it's no good. Even Plankton is skeptical of the claims of this Krabby Patty pandemic. But then he sees the creatures himself and, nah. Unfortunately, both Plankton and even Karen get infected by the virus, forcing SpongeBob to haul himself up on a tower of chum for safety. By some miracle, a splash of chum lands in Krabby Patty Patrick's mouth, making him gag, coughing up the secret patty, and voila, he's back to normal. So the secret is vomiting it back up. Interesting. Unfortunately, Patrick immediately eats the patty and zombifies himself right back. It's an absolute nightmare, but it just tastes so damn good. Realizing chum is the cure, SpongeBob starts chucking it down, force-feeding all these monstrous patty creatures until they're all turned back to their regular selves. Finally, things calm down and Mr. Krabs sulks over his failed secret patty venture. Not only did he lose money on it, but he also almost lost customers who have their own money. SpongeBob gets the last word, saying the OG Krabby Patty recipe doesn't need any changes, and everyone agrees. They all shuffle back to the Krusty Krab, leaving Plankton surrounded by discarded patties and a wrecked restaurant. But just when you think it's over, a patty mutant Patrick grins creepily at the camera, shoving one last burger in your face, laughing like a maniac. It's actually kind of a sinister way to end the show, but, I would never say no to a burger, even if it did turn me into a human beefcake. Actually, it might make me say yes to it. Unlike Gary in Gary Takes a Bath, an episode where SpongeBob has to resort to some creepy methods to get him clean. The episode begins with SpongeBob realizing it's Gary's bath time. But Gary wants nothing to do with it, and honestly, who can blame him? Getting out of the shell to be washed by a sponge? Actually, that sounds pretty nice. Anyway, SpongeBob's first attempt is to toss a boomerang ball, hoping it'll lure Gary to the tub. Instead, it just boomerangs back to him. Wow, if only you could have known that would happen. Gary's still sitting there smugly while SpongeBob's out here throwing every tactic in the book and then some. Next, SpongeBob tries a literal bomb threat. Yep, he straps a fake bomb to his chest, giving Gary 3 seconds to get in the tub or else. Gary's totally unfazed, just watching SpongeBob's desperation spiral. Then comes the hypnosis attempt, where SpongeBob goes full creepy, accidentally conjuring up some freaky girl from a subliminal message nightmare. That doesn't work either, so he tries calling a French restaurant for some reason. The call's a disaster because he can't understand the accent, but he's too far gone to care. Basically, SpongeBob is losing his mind. His desperation reaches new heights when SpongeBob tries leapfrogging Gary into the tub and breaks Gary's shell in the process. More classic signs of neglect towards Gary here. Then he tries bribing him with the $1, only for Mr. Krabs to come out of nowhere and snatch it. So now SpongeBob's got no shell, no $1, and no Gary in the bath. When even his dance routine and fake treasure hunt flop, SpongeBob loses it and decides to bring the bath to Gary himself. He absorbs the water, ready to spray Gary, but Gary dodges every shot like a little escape artist. There is no bathing this snail. SpongeBob finally corners Gary in a tree, or so he thinks. It turns out it's just a gramophone playing meowing sounds, and Gary's fooled him again. To top it all off, Gary nabs SpongeBob's ladder, leaving him stranded in the tree while Gary sasses him about free will and it's a free country. For a guy who meows all the time, he's pretty mouthy, huh? When Gary heads for a mud puddle, SpongeBob gives him a 3-second warning, but Gary calls his bluff. SpongeBob tumbles out of the tree right into the mud, and in the end, he's the one forced to take a bath, with Gary looking on like the smug little mastermind he is. That's actually some pretty masterful psychological manipulation there, Gary. Some people just really know how to get things done. Nobody better than Plankton, though. In Patnocchio, he realizes that the best way to get what he wants is to target an idiot, Patrick. So the episode kicks off with Karen the computer fairy telling this twisted story of Patnocchio, and I don't think there's any real way to prepare for what this is. Plankton, as usual, is scheming to nab a Krabby Patty, and his latest mark is Patrick. Good old-fashioned idiot Patrick. But just as Plankton thinks he's getting somewhere, he gets fried by sunlight through his own magnifying glass, and then gets squashed by Patrick. So now Patrick hears his voice and he's convinced it's his conscience, which I guess makes sense, as it couldn't possibly be his brain. But of course, Plankton takes the idea and runs with it, swooping in and acting like he's Patrick's conscience.
So, stupid, the first thing you need to do is buy some more Krabby Patties on the double. Hiya!
That'll be the first thing I do, Conscience.
He sends Patrick on all these ridiculous errands before getting bored of this chaos he started, and just scribbling out the to-do list, straight up writing in, "Get Plankton the secret formula" instead. To be fair, when you're controlling Patrick, sometimes the least subtle option is the best. They finally end up at the chum bucket, and Plankton tries to get Patrick to toss a Krabby Patty through the mail slot. But of course, Patrick chucks it with all his might, sending it flying onto Pearl's boat, where she's chilling with her friends. Now, Plankton's master plan means going inside Pearl to get it back. Whoa, buddy, this ain't that kind of channel. Okay, you're doing it that way. Once inside, they run into this sketchy guy, Geppetto, who somehow got his hands on the Krabby Patty, and they end up fighting over it in Pearl's stomach. If that wasn't freaky enough, Karen finally swoops in with a gush and flush to blast Plankton and Patrick out of Pearl. Seriously? Gush and flush? Man, this is a weird episode. The whole thing wraps up with Patrick finally finding his actual conscience.
Yup, I'm Patrick's conscience, but I overslept.
As in realizing he has one. Then immediately stomping on Plankton because his new conscience is all, "Hey, that guy's just a bug." Which is a pretty brutal way to end things. He's just bug juice now. Still, some people in Bikini Bottom would love that. I mean, they do something way weirder and grosser in Ink Lemonade. So this episode kicks off with Patrick running a lemonade stand with no clue that he's not even selling lemonade. He's selling straight up water in those jugs.
Lemonade! Lemonade for sale!
False advertising right there. A good lawyer could get him thrown in prison for life, or a week. Squidward comes along in his usual grouchy mood and decides to help Patrick, kinda. He hands Patrick a bunch of rotten lemons just to mess with him, knowing full well that nobody in their right mind could consume them and live to tell the tale. These lemons are so bad they make Patrick's eyes go bloodshot red, and when a customer drinks it, they're instantly sick. Patrick's solution? Dump the lemons and grab water from a toy fire truck. They're the same thing, right? But then SpongeBob shows up, decides this lemonade stand could use some marketing, and starts yelling through a megaphone so loud it makes Squidward squirt ink from his nose. SpongeBob, in true weirdo fashion, decides to taste it. Now, I don't even want to try and analyze what that means. I'll just leave that for the people writing the fan fictions. But SpongeBob loves Squidward's juices. Suddenly, people are lining up for more of this gross black lemonade, and Patrick's gotta find a way to get more ink.
Oh, I'll just have to scare the ink out of him.
But Squidward's not about to just hand over his precious nose juice, because it's weird. So Patrick goes full horror movie. He scares Squidward with everything from creepy organ reveals to unleashing this freaky sea spider named Mildred into his house. Whatever it takes to make Squidward erupt in these weird inky explosions. So now poor Squidward's losing his mind, spraying ink all over the place, while SpongeBob and Patrick keep collecting it to sell and profit. When Squidward finally stumbles onto the haunted scare zone they set up in the front of his place, he's so freaked out he inks into vases, cups, anything else they can find around. Only then does he find out the truth. His ink was the secret ingredient in Patrick's little lemonade scam the whole time. He's furious, but then gets a wild idea. He'll open his own black lemonade stand. Yeah, give it to the people straight from the source, undercut his competition. Perfect. Only he's out of ink. So he literally hires a customer to scare the ink out of him. Enter Don the Whale, who terrifies him so much that Squidward's practically a fire hose of ink. But then the customers figure out where their lemonade is coming from and lose it, puking all over Squidward's house. Nobody wants to gulp down his flavorings, it turns out, because it's disgusting. Meanwhile, SpongeBob and Patrick decide cookies are the new money makers and hand Squidward one, casually mentioning they use spider eggs for chocolate chips. Squidward starts screaming and spraying ink all over again right as spiders come crawling out. It could not be a more unsettling end.